My stepdaughter wants her biological dad to walk her down the aisle, so I told her to let him pay for the wedding. My stepdaughter's biological dad showed up and wanted to be part of her life after ignoring her for years. For context, I've known my stepdaughter since she was 3 years old. I've long stopped referring to her as my stepdaughter and instead refer to her as my daughter. I shall refer to her as my daughter for the rest of the post. When I met my wife, she was between a rock and a hard place. She had a 2-year-old daughter and was staying at an NGO. She was barely making ends meet and was running away from her abusive boyfriend. My sister worked at the NGO, but her profession was law. She spent her weekends there because she was passionate about helping people. She was always asking me to come help her out, but I usually just spent weekends with my friends. One weekend I joined her after some of my friends cancelled plans. That was where I met Chloe. Chloe was one of the smartest people I'd ever met. She was also very funny and sarcastic. I thought about her for a long time after I went back home. I asked my sister what her story was, but she refused to tell me, so I went back the next weekend with a gift for Chloe's baby and an invitation for coffee with her. Something about her drew me in. It still draws me in to this day. She told me her story. She'd fallen in love and dropped out of college in her first year because of the man that she was dating. He promised that his music career was going to take off, so when she fell pregnant, he told her to drop out of school. Her parents tried to talk her out of it, but she was having none of it. What followed was nearly 3 years of living with someone who abused her. He would starve her and emotionally and physically abuse her. She had nowhere to go, so she stayed with him even though it killed her every day. When she went to the hospital and the staff tried to get her to report him, she would lie to them. Each and every time she covered for him. But the day he tried to hurt her daughter because she refused to give him money that she got from a part-time job, she realized she needed to leave. She could not bear the thought of her daughter being subjected to such abuse, so when he was sleeping, she left. He tried to find her. She was on the run from him for about 2 months as she survived on the kindness of strangers. Then she came across my sister when she got caught trying to steal some food in a store. My sister not only brought her food, but allowed her to stay at her house for the night. The next morning, she'd gotten her a place at one of the NGOs that she worked with. She was able to work with her to get her a restraining order against her ex. Chloe and I quickly became friends. I got her a job with one of my old family friends, and slowly she started to rebuild her life. I spent a lot of time with her and her daughter Tania. I formed a close bond with her, and then we fell in love. We moved in together and we had a good and healthy relationship. Then, when Tania was 5, we got married. Then she gave birth to our son Jackson a year later. Their childhood was normal. We had the perfect family life. Tania was always top of her class and ended up getting into nursing school. Jackson is still in high school. He's a senior. Tania doesn't know the full story of what happened with her father. She's only ever known me and her mum, even though she knows that she's not my biological daughter. We decided not to tell her the full extent of how her father is a monster. All she knows about him is that he's ignored all of her attempts to get in contact with him. If it were up to me, then I wouldn't want her to get in contact with Lorenzo. What he did to her mum took so many years to heal. When I think about how she would have nightmares for years after the ordeal, I shiver. I hate him, but I've not attempted to find him. Bringing him up still hurts my wife, and all I ever want is to bring her peace. Our daughter has been with her boyfriend since their first year in high school together, and they've recently gotten engaged. He's a good man, and they're both lucky to have each other. I'm very excited to be giving her away. I know that she'll be safe with Henry, who's currently doing his degree in medicine. He takes care of her and has never hurt her as far as I know. The wedding is going to be in a couple of months. My wife is helping her with preparations while I'm paying for the entire wedding, as it is done. We've had no hiccups over the past couple of months. Everything has been going smoothly. That is, until he came back into her life. I remember my wife coming home from work one evening shaking. It was a while before I got her to talk so she could tell me what was going on. She told me that she'd seen him. He knew where her office was and he wanted to talk to her. She told me she got security to kick him out, but she was still shaken. I made a couple of calls, finding out that he was staying at a local motel. He was a washed-up musician with children from different women. He'd been in town for a couple of days and was in serious debt. Then I paid him a visit. He didn't know who I was, but once I sat down across from him, I made several things clear to him. I told him that I didn't care if he wanted to act like he'd changed. People like him didn't change. If he ever tried to talk to my wife again, I would make sure that he wouldn't be able to talk again. I let him know that I had all of his information, including who he owed money. Those people would appreciate if I told them where he was. So I told him to stay away from my wife because she was not the naive woman whose dreams he stole years ago. He told me that he wasn't a threat. He'd moved on with his life. He said that he only wanted one thing, which was to be part of his daughter's life. I asked him why he wanted to be part of her life now when he'd ignored her messages over the years. He decided that now was the time to emotionally appeal to me. He broke down into tears and said that the guilt had been killing him all those years. I told him that he didn't deserve any reprieve for it. Nothing he can do can ever fix what he did. I told him that I didn't want him anywhere near my daughter. Her life is going well and she doesn't need him to poison it. He begged me to let him at least talk to her once. He really wants to make up for all those lost years. I told him there was no way in hell. I told him he had until tomorrow morning to leave this town, or I would make sure that he left it running. When it comes to my family, I do not play. I have not forgiven him for what he's done, and I don't think he should be allowed anywhere near my daughter. I told him that I wanted him to be gone by the end of the week. I really thought I'd succeeded in getting rid of a threat to my family, but he has not left. My wife just told me that he sent our daughter a message and wants to meet with her. I'm fuming. Something has to be done about this. He's not worthy to be her father. Not after the hell he put her and her mum through. So, is it a good idea to find out when they're meeting up so that I can make sure he has no evil intentions? Update. Now my daughter is mad at me. I managed to find out when and where he wanted to meet her. I wanted to make sure that she would be safe. I know how violent he can be. My wife has told me the details of his cruelty for many years. He might have put on the face of a sad father when he saw me, but I know that he's a monster on the inside. So earlier today, they met up at a cafe. I followed them, but sat in the back as I watched them talk. They talked for hours, and then she left. When she left, he was still sitting there. I wanted to talk to him, but I decided not to. But then, when I was in my car, he came to the car. He asked me if I could give him a ride to where he stayed. I asked him if I'd not told him that he was to leave town. He said he knew that I was stalking him, it was obvious. But how would Tania feel knowing that I was following them around? I told him to leave town while he still could. There is nothing here for him. He doesn't deserve to be part of her life. He's had years to act right, but hasn't taken the opportunity to act right. Instead, he sent her mum threats, only being stopped by a restraining order. He told me that she was his blood and that I had no right to keep them apart. I asked why he wanted to be a part of her life now that she was about to be successful. I told him that if he tried to get money out of her, I would make sure that he regretted it. He walked away after I told him that. I hoped that he'd heard my message loud and clear. An hour later, Tania called me and she was upset. She said she'd never expected me not to trust her like that and that I'd invaded her privacy. She told me that she wanted to give him a chance. I was still her father, he was not a threat. She also told me that she didn't appreciate how I threatened to have her biological dad beaten up. Excuse me, but when did I threaten to have him beaten up? When I fight, I do not fight dirty. I have my ways to teach him a lesson that would not involve my hands getting dirty. So the bottom line is that she's upset with me and she's started to give me the silent treatment. I don't feel good about that. He's already putting a rift between us, and he's been here for less than a month. Do you think I should chill a bit and let him get to know her? I don't know what to do now because the last thing I want is to go through what her mum went through. He's emotionally abusive and drains any goodness in sight. Update. She's decided that he will walk her down the aisle, so let him pay for it. It's been about 3 months since Tania's father Lorenzo came back into her life. He's slowly manipulated her, and she thinks the world of him. I can see through him, but I've had to bite my tongue when it comes to him. Her mother has tried her hardest to get her to stay away from him. We've been told that if we do not stop, then she will cut us out of her life. We've told her that he used to abuse her, but he managed to convince her that he's changed. We've slowly started to lose her, but what happened this week is the last straw. Since she's getting married in a couple of months, it was already decided that I would give her away. She asked me to give her away the very same day that she got engaged because I was the only father figure in her life. Well, this week, she called us for dinner at her house. I didn't know that Lorenzo would be there, otherwise I wouldn't have shown up. Either way, for her sake, I acted like he wasn't present. Then she told us she had news. Her dad was going to move here permanently, and she wanted him to walk her down the aisle. I was shocked, because that was something she offered to me at the very beginning of her engagement. So I asked her why she would do that when she had asked me first. She said that while she appreciated me, he was her real dad. It hurt for her to dismiss me for someone she barely knew who had done nothing for her in her life. I was silent for the rest of the dinner. I wasn't even angry. I felt very, very sad. I watched throughout the week as they spent nearly every day together. My wife tried to comfort me because I was so hurt, but nothing could fix how I was feeling. I guess the saying is true when it comes to blood calling to blood. But then it got worse when I was not invited to dinner with her fiancé's parents. His father called me later on and asked me why I didn't make it. I told him that I didn't even know about it. He felt bad because he felt like he was causing drama, but he wasn't. I asked my wife if that was where she was when she wasn't answering her phone. She told me that she had been invited, but she didn't show up. She also didn't tell me about it because she didn't want to hurt my feelings. The evening got worse when Tania sent me a message reminding me that she needed over $10,000 for catering because it was going to be a big wedding. I was taken aback. She had the nerve to only include me in her prep when she wanted to. Since she had her real father back in her life, then he could pay for it. I didn't reply to her message as I didn't want to say anything that I would regret. The next afternoon she came to the house. She said that she wanted to take Jackson for lunch. I told her that she could spend time with her brother, but she had to make sure she brought him home early because it was a school night. She said no problem, and then she handed me the invoice for the catering. I told her that I thought Lorenzo was going to take care of it. He is, after all, the father of the bride. Her face changed as soon as I said that. She asked how she could just ask him for so much money. I told her that since he called himself a successful musician, then surely he could afford it. She said that she could not believe that I was being so unreasonable. I told her that when she gave back my role of giving her away, that was when she lost all rights to my money. I told her that I do not see her as my daughter these days. If she wants to be seen as Lorenzo's daughter, then she should do that. But she knows that for the rest of the wedding expenses, he was responsible. She got very mad and shouted at me. When she saw that I had no interest in arguing with her, she left. She has since sent me messages expressing her disappointment. She also called her mum crying and saying that I was ruining her wedding. Her mum told her that she could not change her mind. It was my money. Her mum told her that she had been acting like a brat all week by excluding me even though I've been a good father to her since she was 3. She said she didn't want to give up a chance to get to know her biological dad. But Chloe asked her if she'd ever felt like she didn't belong in this house. She warned her that her father was just waiting to disappoint her. He's not changed. He will leave her very heartbroken. After that, she told us that we were both not invited to the wedding, and then she blocked us. I know that she will come round. We're all just trying to do our best for her and protect her from her father. I know for a fact that he has ulterior motives. Update. My daughter's wedding day was a disaster. This weekend was supposed to be Tania's wedding. Instead, for her, it was a day of pain, as she was forced to see what a true monster her father was. I told her that he would hurt her, but I had no idea how far he was going to go. That man is not human. He doesn't have a heart. Who does this to their daughter? So basically, after I pulled out funding, he promised her that he was going to pay back for everything. He claimed that he was getting money from royalties. Even though I told her many times that his career was dead, she believed him. It was like she was under some sort of spell. Within a month, he told her that everything was ready. She was supposed to be getting married on Saturday, but when the guests showed up, it was to an empty venue. Her makeup artist and bridesmaids were the only people to show up, and to everyone's surprise, there was no wedding being held at the venue. She was told that she'd received a refund for the deposit, except she didn't remember cancelling her own wedding. Sure enough, the venue owner showed her the signed proof and emails from her to the venue. It appeared that her dearest dad hacked into her email communication with everyone and cancelled it all. As if it could get any worse, it got worse as she discovered that he had helped herself to some money in her bank, about $2,000. She's been working for herself for years, making beads and also crocheting clothes, so that is how she was able to move out. All the money he stole was very important for the running of her business. I remember that she called me crying, saying that he'd taken everything from her, and she didn't know what to say to her fiancé. I asked if maybe her mum and I could come over and she could explain everything to us. She told me that she was too ashamed to look at us now with the way she'd been acting. I told her that I'd warned her, that much she knew. However, I was still her father, and I wanted to be there for her. She sent me her location and I took her mother with me. Then she told me how over the months she'd become close with her father, who she thought was arranging the wedding. He claimed to have royalty money that was coming in, so he asked her to pay for a few things. Unknown to us, he was also crashing on her couch because he had nowhere to go. He kept on saying that he had a job lined up and money lined up. She started to think that maybe what I told her was right and he didn't have a penny to his name. Soon it was the day of the wedding, and according to him, everything was sorted. She couldn't have meetings with the planner because she was so busy with work and school, so he went to see the planner. He didn't even allow her boyfriend to see the planner, which should have been a red flag. Then came the day of the wedding. When she showed up to find people standing outside, she was humiliated, as everyone wondered where the wedding was. As she realized that her father was nothing but a disappointment, she had a mental breakdown. She didn't even know what to say to her fiancé. She had brought this upon them. When she got home to find out that her money was gone, she felt even worse. She stopped answering her phone calls and she only called me. She told me that she was sorry for taking me for granted. She could have had a good wedding if she'd not fallen for Lorenzo's lies. Now she was regretting her choices and didn't know what to do. I tried my best to comfort her. She didn't know any better, but at least now she knew that this was the reason we did not allow that man to be part of her life. She stayed with me and her mum for the rest of the weekend. She'll speak to her fiancé and tell him what happened next week. I am sad that her heart got broken. She's always been one to see the best in everyone. I can't let this memory haunt her for too long. It's not fair that Lorenzo was able to ruin my daughter's big day. Something must be done about this. If he recalls, I told him that if he dared to hurt my daughter, there would be hell to pay. He's done that, and I will make sure he regrets ever making her cry. I'm coming for him, and he doesn't even know it. Update. Payback can be so sweet. The thing about people like Lorenzo is that they're greedy and don't know when to stop. They would fall into a ditch while chasing $1. That kind of thing makes them the target of people like me who want revenge. It was so easy to catch him that he practically walked into the trap. I spoke with Tania's boyfriend and told him all that had happened. I asked for his help. He called Lorenzo from a private number and lied that he was from a record label and had come across some of his music. He told him that he wanted to sign him and would like him to come for an interview. There was clearly no interview, it was an ambush. He went to the place that we lured him to and waited. When he saw me walking through the door, he screamed. He asked if I was there to end his miserable life. No way would I ever get my hands dirty with the likes of him. I told him to sit down. I was going to tell him what was going to happen now. I knew where he was staying, which motel, and which room. He was dumb enough to skip to the town that is right next to ours. I only had to make a few calls after we tracked his location on the call. As he was sitting across from me now, Henry was busy searching his room for the money. I told him that what he did to my daughter was the worst thing a father could ever do. I told him that he was a waste of time and space. When he died, no one would even notice, because he does not have anyone who still loves him. I told him that I knew about all the kids he'd left abandoned, all the women he'd scorned, and all the people who he'd borrowed money from. I had all their contacts, and just sending them one message would get them here. I told him that if I wanted, I could lock him in there and wait to see which one of his enemies would come looking for him first. I would not be responsible for what happened to him if he came out alive. When I mentioned that, he became so pitiful. He was shaking as he begged me to have mercy on him. He said that they would make sure that he didn't survive. He had hurt too many people. He asked me to give him a second chance. He would change. I then told him about how I met my wife, and how she was so broken after he left her, physically and mentally. I asked him if that didn't make him a monster. I asked if he did that to other women, and he failed to answer me. I asked him again, and this time he said yes. He truly is the scum of the earth. Do you think that he deserves to be set free and continue what he's doing? If people like him are allowed to roam free, then who is ever safe? He doesn't care who he screws over, as long as he gets what he wants. He leaves people empty shells, and he doesn't care one bit. I'm sitting in his car, he's still in the room, and I'm deciding what to do with him. What can you do with such a monster without getting your own hands dirty? I don't know, but I do know that he's not walking out of there a free man. My wife and so many other people did not suffer for nothing. Now he has to face his judgment day, one way or another. Update. He left that room in cuffs. I sent a tip to the police. He had several warrants for his arrest due to fraud, theft, and domestic violence. Some of the cases were very old and nothing had been done about them, but soon it became a pattern. He ran away from the law using different names and facades until he made the mistake of coming back to the scene of his first crime, And there, he found his judgment in the form of me. We got most of my daughter's money back and then sold his beat-down car to get the rest of the money. It was not enough for the big wedding that she wanted, but we made it work. Everyone in the family came together and supported her. On the day of her wedding, I was the one who walked her down the aisle. My gift to her was a weekend getaway for her and her new husband. She was so happy on the day, and I was so happy that she was not crying anymore. At the end of the day, my wife told me that she'd once prayed for a savior when she was still with Lorenzo and had nothing. Every day she had prayed that someone would care enough about her and Tania to make sure that every day they were smiling. She says that she's found that person in me, and I'm happy that she has. As for that buffoon, he got his life in prison. It turns out that one of the women he abused ended up succumbing to her injuries because of him. This was many years ago. This woman's son never stopped fighting to get justice for his mum. I was there when he testified. It was heart-wrenching. I held my wife's hand a little tighter, grateful that it hadn't been her. On the bright side, my daughter found out that she has siblings, 5 in total. She's not yet ready to talk to them, but she will once she's done settling into her marriage. She still has to work through the trauma of what Lorenzo did to her, but I hope that she will give her siblings a chance. I saw some of them in court, and the resemblance was uncanny. Each and every one of them had the most haunted look in their eyes, the same that my wife used to have. When they described what they went through at the hands of that man, everyone was silent. Tania told me that she got away better than her other siblings. I told her that it was not about who was scarred, she also went through pain. She said that she was just glad that she didn't remember it. When he got a life sentence, we all rejoiced that the justice system came through for us. There are so many people whose lives will never be the same because of him. The worst part is that at my sister's NGO, there are hundreds more stories just like this one, and they do not always lead to happy endings, but at least this one did. Wow, that was quite a heavy story this time, guys. What did you think about it? OP sounds like a really honourable man who cared about his wife, stepdaughter and family, but the biological dad was a real piece of work. Do you think the parents were right not to tell their daughter what their biological dad had put them through in the beginning? Maybe if she had known earlier, she wouldn't have succumbed to his lies. Things did turn out well for them in the end, but it was a long process, and so many people were hurt along the way. I'm glad that the biological dad, Lorenzo, ended up in prison. What do you guys think? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching. Remember to like and subscribe, and as always, see you next time.